So, Carlyle, you've been having a conversation with Charlie about WWE wrestling. How would you segue that into your topic?
I'd probably, I'd be kind of looking off into the distance and not really paying attention because, it's never been something that I've been that into. But then I might think, but you know what is great in WWE is the intro music that every person comes on. I mean, nothing has endured better, I think, in the public ethos at the moment than John Cena's intro music, purely for meme reasons. And just think, I'd love to make some, if I was ever commissioned to do that, which is unlikely because I'm an independent musician.
That's brilliant. All right, on with the show.
Well, he's got a new guest, time to put him to the test. So hey, what's the topic? We don't know, cause he never does research for this show. His name is Jason, he wants to talk to you about a topic you love or something you do. No two topics are ever the same. That might sound impressive, but they're all pretty lame. A conversation with
Hello, you're listening to A Conversation With, the podcast where each week I'm joined by a different guest and we have a conversation on a topic of their choice. And this week I'm joined by Carlyle, and we will be talking about being an independent musician, as you would have heard before that new intro music that we've got, also kindly provided by our guest, Carlyle. So say hello to everyone.
Hello, how's everybody doing? I don't expect a response.
They might tweet one in later, so...
That'd be good. I really look forward to it.
The day that your Twitter feed explodes, you'll know why. So, Carlyle, as you teased at the opening, we're going to be talking about being an independent musician. I know what a musician is. What's an independent musician?
So, the vast majority of music that you hear, though this is changing rapidly by the day, is from artists who are signed themselves to record labels that handle the publicity and the distribution of the music. And previously, though more and more often, not anymore, they would handle the touring costs and booking the tours. And what they do is they take the majority, or a large percentage of the earnings from your music in return for those services.
Right.
But
that's not happening to you, though.
It's not happening to me, and that has its pros and its cons. It's kind of ironic that I'm here to talk about this because I'm not really an expert on this, but I've been slowly getting better at this since like 2012, where I was 14 when I've been trying to do this, and I'm not successful at this particularly either because I just the other day I went on Spotify for the first time by myself, not via any record labels. I started doing that about 2 years ago. But you can't have your money until you've made $20 from the distributor that I use. And I made my $20 last week.
Oh, well done. So how long did that take?
That took about 2 years.
About 2 years.
Yeah,
I'm just doing the maths, trying to work out when I'll eventually get $1 from this podcast. So I've got a goal.
Yeah, it was mostly from Spotify streams, and those are worth sort of 0.000000001 American cents per play. So it's been building those up for 2 years, and I'd make about $1 a month, and slowly getting more and more. And yeah, so I got $20 and spent it in a day. It took me 2 years to earn it, but I spent it. But I'm here to talk about the sort of little things I've learned.
Yeah, well, before you get onto that, what did you spend it on?
I spent it on some other music to listen to. Okay. It would make sense if I spent it on something to further the craft, wouldn't it? But
I thought you were going to be like,
I only made $20.
Well, I was expecting to hear like, I bought a really nice sandwich and... But I mean, it was really nice. It tasted even better because it was money that I'd earned through music.
Well, I really wasted some of it. I mean, one of the songs that I bought was a meme.
Right.
It's just, I got it in my head because my co-host on my podcast is really keen on Elder Scrolls memes. And there's this song which is called Dagoth Wave, which is just this god character has just sampled his voice and turned it into like an electronic wave thing. And I hate it, but I had it in my mind, and I hate you, Chris. I'm going to buy this thing with the $20 that I earned. And I did.
Wow.
So I don't spend my money wisely. It's good that I don't make very much in one go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we appreciate the music you've provided here, so we'll stick an extra plug in right now. I know we have some listeners on Spotify. I don't know who you are, but I know we've got you. I can see that. If you're already on Spotify, it's not going to cost you anything to go over and listen. So links are in the show notes. Head on over, find something you like. There you go. That's an extra plug for you there.
Thanks, man.
That's all right.
That's the dream, really, is that you don't know who they are.
Yeah. There's also, while we're talking about listeners, I don't know who you are. I know I've got some listeners in Sweden, and I'd love to hear from you because I've seen that they've been there from like day one. I want to know who you are. Just tweet me. It's ACW Pod on Twitter or Instagram, or email is aconversationwithpod@gmail.com. Please get in touch. I'm really, every time I look and see the new episodes, I see these ones from Sweden. I want to know who you are. I don't know anyone in Sweden. I mean, you get the odd one from different parts of the world, but it's the consistency that really gets me. I just want to know who they are. Oh dear. So we've already derailed. So independent musician. I'm so sorry. I've got to stay on track, but I won't. I guess a couple of questions for you, because as somebody who is not musical in any way, and I mean, I probably can't even listen to music in the proper way, so that's how bad I am. How many instruments are you playing then? Are you? I mean, I've heard the music you've provided for this show, and listen to this plug for the new show that we have, Getting to Know Who, that you've also provided the intro music for and been the first guest on. So have a little plug there. Links and everything in the show notes. But so I've heard like some different types of music from you and different instruments. But I mean, how versatile are you?
So I started playing drums when I should go back further than that. Get ready for a tour of my life. My dad plays guitar, and he tried to teach me and my older brother guitar at the same time. Now my older brother was 6 and I was 4, and he was way better at it than I was. And I kind of got frustrated watching him be a lot better at it than I was. So I kind of gave up on that. And then the film School of Rock came out.
Right.
And I thought the drummer in School of Rock was so cool.
He wasn't, but okay, go on.
He wasn't retroactive, but when you're a kid, you're like, oh, he's so cool. When you grow up, you're like, oh, he's really annoying.
Yeah. And again, sorry to derail you. It's going to take a long time to get through this conversation, but he played the cymbal, right? Like, I can understand the guy who played classical piano can play kind of rock keyboard. Or you're playing a double bass, you're going to play a bass. No, so I think it was a cello. She was playing a cello, now you're playing a bass. The guy's playing guitar, you're just changing style of guitar. At a stretch, I can get all of that. You are so bad at music that the teacher decided, just hit these two pieces of metal together. That's probably all you can handle. And you are now an expert drummer. Now, again, I'm not very musical, so I will ask you, how realistic is that?
Pretty unrealistic. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to, for that film, I mean, do you remember the climax of that film? Is he gets outed as someone who's impersonated a teacher and just completely written off their curriculum to teach them how to play rock music. And at the end of the movie,
he gets to open his own school.
Their parents are okay with him doing that properly.
Well, it's Jack Black. He's got a friendly face.
You get away with murder with that friendly face, Jack Black.
So, sorry, you decided to play the drums.
Yeah, so I decided to play the drums, and my dad works in the military, or did. He's retired now. And he went away to Afghanistan to do some logistic stuff. And so while that would happen, my mum bought me for my birthday this tiny little Yamaha 4 drum. It's basically just 4 pads, and you could go through a bunch of cycles. And that was my first drum set, was this little 4 thing. Kind of, for like very small children, which I was, so it made sense. But when my dad came back, he was like, no. My boy said he wants to play the drums. So that Christmas, I came downstairs to a real drum set. I started taking lessons, and I kind of always been a singer, but I didn't play any toned instruments. I was only playing drums. So I I started taking piano lessons a bit later in my life, just so I could understand keys and things.
Right.
So I could, really write my own music. Because most of what I do, while I can play the instruments, and I'm moving more and more into recording the instruments live, I tend to make the sounds artificially. So for the score for the intro music for this podcast, the drums and the horns, which are maybe the most prominent bit besides the bass, are artificial. They're not real.
Shh, don't tell anyone that. No, he's lying. We had a full band come in and we recorded live. It was beautiful.
But then the bass is real. So I just but I was already aware that I could do that, so I wanted to learn how to play piano, just to really understand what I was doing. So I wasn't just clicking random buttons in kind of software. So that's why I started to learn piano, and I stuck with it, but I'm terrible at reading toned music now. I'm a very good improviser. I'll toot my own horn. I know what my strengths and my weaknesses are, but I'm terrible at reading music.
Right.
If it's got notes on it. So I'm a classically trained snare player, but that's only ever on one line. It's just rhythm. You gotta really know your rhythm. So I'm very good at that. But once you add more than one line, things get difficult for me.
Okay.
And the percussion qualification is you do one part on snare and you do one part on the marimba. And the marimba is basically just a really big xylophone.
Wow.
And the problem was I could play, when I was sort of doing this at 14, I could play snare drum better than university students, but I play marimba like a toddler. And you have to do both.
Well, to be honest,
so
the way you've described it, it does sound like the instrument of a toddler. So, sorry, any marimba listeners.
It's just scaled up.
It's just a giant xylophone. Is it multicolored?
Well, you don't buy them multicolored, but if you really want to, you could make them multicolored.
Okay.
I'm sure you could find someone.
Right.
They're huge. They're the size of, a man and a half.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I thought you're supposed to pick an instrument that you can carry around the halls at school so that people think you're cool because you're in a band.
Yeah, that's the woe of being a drummer, is everybody else goes off and enjoys the after concert, and
you're still packing away your kit.
You have to pack up your drum set, yeah. You have to get there earlier than everyone to set it all up.
Have you been in a couple of bands then?
I've been in a few. I was in one with my older brother and his friends.
Is this your older brother
puberty.
That was playing guitar better than you?
Yes, exactly.
Was he still playing guitar in this band?
He was playing guitar in this band. That's actually not something I've been able to get over until very recently. I've only very recently picked up the guitar and decided to let it into my life. But yeah, I was the singer in that band, and that's when I was 10 and 11. So my puberty hadn't really kicked in, and I was a very good singer that could sing very high.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, the lifespan
did that change?
on this band is a bit finite. I did some growing up and became a much worse singer very quickly.
Funny how that happens.
To crawl myself back from that. So that band didn't last forever because of biology. And I was in another band at school where I was the drummer and the singer, but that was just for a year at school, and then people decided they would rather do other stuff. So I started doing a lot more music by myself, and now I'm in kind of an extremely silly band called WNR with one of the co-hosts on my podcast, where we tentatively, people describe us as a comedy band. We don't like to call ourselves a comedy band because that implies that what we're doing is actually funny and meant to be funny. If we just call ourselves a rock band with bad lyrics, then it's okay if no one else thinks it's funny but us, because we're not trying to be funny. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we don't like to call ourselves.
Well, the same way this is definitely not a comedy podcast. It's a very serious conversation, and if somebody finds it funny, that's great, but wouldn't label it. I think it's technically labeled as an educational podcast, so which is probably an even bigger misnomer than a comedy podcast. I'm learning something. I'm learning not to buy my son drums, so that's one thing. Right.
Not to buy your son drums.
No. My wife is always suggesting a different instrument. This friend of ours plays piano. Maybe they could give him lessons. Like, well, yeah, maybe. And I'd like him to learn guitar. Maybe. Why not? But again, I'm not very musical. He is though, and my wife is as well. They love music and songs and singing and listening to music, and I'll read a book, to be honest. I'll enjoy the silence. I don't know what to say. Do you know what?
You must be fun at parties.
I tell you, it's funny you say that, because it's one of the few things that people just cannot accept is if you tell them, I don't really like music, and they look at you just like, that's impossible. I'm like, all the kind of things where people will be like, oh, but surely you have music on in the house when you're doing the washing up. No, I have Netflix on when I'm doing the washing up, or I'm listening to a podcast, possibly my own. It's my vanity, but I prefer to do something like that.
I listen to my own music. That's my vanity.
Yeah. So I need, and actually the music that I do like, I generally like much more the lyrics. Like if I really like a song, it will be because it has very interesting lyrics, more so than, it's got amazing music.
Do you listen to much rap? Because obviously the focus there is a lot more.
No, because I said I like the lyrics.
Yeah, I expected you to say something like that. Obviously, most of the rap that kind of is played on the radio doesn't have much to talk about, but there is the stuff that does, when you really get into rap, you tend to find rappers that say things that are very important to you and that you can relate to, and it's a whole
but
it's a whole
I'm
genre
feeling
of many
if it's...
subgenres, and some of those subgenres are trash, but
I feel like if he's saying something that's important to me, just turn the music off and talk to me. To be honest, sorry any musical listeners, but this is the thing that gets me, is that sometimes I honestly feel the music is in the way of me understanding what the person is saying. I'm like, I think he's got something really important to say, but I can't quite hear him because of all this music. Can we just turn the music off so I can listen? And that's how we ended up driving from Italy to France for about 10 hours listening to an audiobook as opposed to any music. So
your son's going to grow up very well read.
No, but he loves... it's funny because I listen to a lot of Australian podcasts, and occasionally they mention the Wiggles. I'm sure you've heard them referenced.
I've heard them reference it. Yeah, I never really have seen it properly.
He loves it. He's watching it all the time, and then he comes in singing the songs, and then the songs are in my head. I don't need that, but he loves music. He's always singing.
I see. It's a Wiggles-based resentment of music.
Pretty much, probably.
It's always the Wiggles that gets to people.
Yeah, the Wiggles and High Five. I don't know why he watches so much Australian TV shows. I don't get it, but he loves a little sing along. Anyway, I digress. So you'd got a drum kit. That's how it all kicked off. You started drumming. You had a kind of a Yamaha sort of electronic drum pad kit thing.
Yeah, tiny little
Dad
thing
came
with
back.
4 circles on it.
Yeah, nah, this isn't good enough. Real drum kit. You did that. Then you were saying about the snare drum and the qualification you had. Where did we go from there? How did we get to where we are today?
I started learning piano, but my sort of reading really never really took off in terms of what the lessons were there to do. But they did teach me really how to understand keys, and I learned to improvise. And really, all I wanted to do was be better at writing. So that the piano really helped me with that. And after that, I picked up ukuleles and guitars and bass guitars, and I've just started playing a lot more instruments, and I'm able to record a lot more stuff live now, which obviously helps if you're doing everything by yourself, as I tend to be. Generally music will sound better the more that you record live as opposed to programming on a program. That's why I'm always striving now to try and learn new instruments. I picked up a saxophone for a while, and I could play it, but there's so much faff if you're doing a saxophone. You gotta take it apart and clean it all the time. Put it back. It takes forever to play, and the reed.
Yeah, I was gonna say any reeded instrument that's too much commitment. That's so I do think there are certain instruments. Again, saying I'm not musical at all. As with all of these things, as is becoming a trend on this show, I have a lot of useless information that floats around my head. I know a lot about many different things. I'm not an expert, but I just know bits and pieces. And so when my wife sort of suggests different instruments and things like that, I do have an idea of kind of what is it. So I know that the guitar is very easy to learn by yourself. That's one of the easiest ones to kind of go online, find tab, just download that, learn to play a song. It's quite simple. I know, like, the violin is, they say you should never teach yourself that, because if you try, you fail, you then go and have lessons, and the first, like, 6 months is spent teaching you to undo all the bad habits you've taught yourself, because it's all to do with the way you hold the bow and the way you hold the thing, and it's there's so much technique. So
the fact that it's fretless, really, as well. Do you know what I mean by that if I say that?
I do, because I actually learned to play the violin very, very briefly. Very briefly. And when I say very briefly, in junior school for a couple of months. Yeah. But surprisingly, as a non-musical person, didn't stick with it.
Right.
But that I kind of wish I had, because I think that's an unusual instrument to know how to play. And Olga, who was on the photography episode, our dear Russian photographer, she is very good on the violin. So she didn't speak about that, but as we used to work together, I know for a fact. And she had offered to teach my son, and then we moved abroad. So, well, we moved back to England, I should say. So that's not happening.
The process of moving abroad.
Yeah, she's like, I'll teach him the violin. I was like, I can't stay here any longer. I've got to leave. Sorry. But yeah, it's so. But reeded instruments, I think, are the worst, because you have to constantly buy new reeds, and then it's like, oh, this is, the reed is too new. It hasn't been kind of worn in. So, like, there's always, to be honest, probably just an excuse. But that's right. I'm calling you out. If you're a saxophone player and you're listening to this, it's an excuse. You did a bad performance. There's nothing wrong with the reed.
It's an exclusionist thing. They want people to think that it's really, you've got to do all sorts with the reed, but really you can just pick up the saxophone and do it. But you're not allowed to know that unless you are a saxophonist.
Can you play the bagpipes?
I can't. Well, I've not tried. I imagine that I can't. I hear it's quite the learning process to get to a bagpipe. I'd love to, but it's not often you walk down the street and someone's selling bagpipes.
Well,
but
if it
happens and they're affordable, I might have a go.
I have a friend who bought himself some bagpipes, and I don't know why. To this day, I don't know. And I was like, oh, you're just going to hang them like on the wall, like as a decoration? No, I'm going to play them.
What?
And I'm like, you're going to play them, but do you know how? No, but it can't be that hard. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's one of the hardest instruments to play.
Notoriously difficult.
And to this day, he's never played it.
That's probably a good thing for his neighbours and whatnot.
I don't know. I don't live in it. It's not my problem.
Imagine, though, if you come back to Italy one day and he is phenomenal at bagpipes. He's just making way in a way that people can stand to listen to it.
Well, if there's anything that's going to send me back to England, it's probably that.
I forgot you wouldn't really appreciate it, would you?
Will be my shortest trip yet. So, so you've got into writing music. So, you mentioned that you're on Spotify and your music is being used on some very professional podcasts, I've heard.
Yes, I've really made it big time.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. Hope you can retire happy. What are your kind of goals then? So you mentioned some of the benefits. I'll go back. So you mentioned that there are benefits, I should say advantages and disadvantages to being independent. It's very clear to maybe see the disadvantages, because obviously if I'm signed to a record label and they are footing the bill and they're paying for studio time and they're paying for promotion and they're putting my name everywhere and getting me, in the public eye, I see all the positive of that. So what are the advantages of being independent? Basically,
it's entirely monetary is the advantage of being independent. And it also depends on how controlling a record label might be. They might want to censor you or not want you to have a political song, or they might not want you. For example, my albums, my releases are all very mixed genres because I'm into lots of stuff, and I'll have quite heavy metal on the same album as like singer-songwriter stuff. And for maybe good reason, a record label might say, no, we don't want you to do that. Because it kind of throws fans off.
Yeah.
But if you're free to make the music you want to make, so there's creative benefits to it. But that's a bit of a cynical thing. Obviously, not all record labels are going to try and control you like that. It depends very much on kind of the studio executives and things like that. I say studio, obviously not studio. You know what I mean? Company executives. But the big thing is the monetary thing. So yes, the record label will really put your name out there. that handle the publicity, it's a lot easier to get off on the right foot in terms of people knowing that you exist if you're signed to a record label. It's much easier to get started, but you get very little money from the whole thing in terms of how much of you're earning, and most of that, or a sizable portion of that, if not most of that, will go to the record label. If you're independent, you have to hope that you get big, you have to do the publicity yourself. You have to hope that you can make the right connections. But if you do get big, you stand to make much more money off of your creative endeavors, which you can guarantee will have full control over and the full copyright claim to. That should be said too. Most of the times in signed situations, signed to a record label, they have the rights generally to your music.
Yeah, I think that's
more so than you do.
That's an interesting thing, isn't it, with regards to kind of creatives in general, is that, you especially when you're starting out, you're just so happy to have your vision there for people to see. And it's always kind of that small print that catches you out. I think the famous example if you really like comic books, the famous example, I'm just thinking about like, creators of ones like Superman, and how big Superman became. And then like, the guys that have created it are almost penniless when the films are coming out and all of this stuff is happening, because, actually DC owns the character, even though you've invented him, you've created everything about him and done that, but you've signed it all away. So it's kind of that thing, isn't it? That, yeah, it's yours, but it's not really yours. And
it's a fitting analogy.
Yeah. So I suppose it's good to hold on to your things, and I think again it depends why you're doing it, doesn't it? If it is solely a financial endeavor, maybe going through a record label, that can be, I'll make the music they ask me to make. I don't really care. All I care about is getting a paycheck. I suppose if you've got a bit more, well, this is the music I want to make. They might not let me make it, but this is what I want to make. It makes sense to say, well, I'll do it myself. Eventually, if other people like it, they respond well to it, and they are happy to pay for it. That's money in the bank. But at the end of the day, it's what I want, and I'm keeping it kind of pure and the way I want it to be received by people. So, well done.
And like I said, it's not all the time. It's a very cynical way to look at record labels, but it is a thing that happens. A lot of people start a record label because they love music and they want to get it out into the world, and they want to bring artists together and make a community, and all the props to them. And they've got to make money somehow. Obviously, they have to take a percentage of what you make for representing you. That makes sense to me. But yeah, some people tend to be quite controlling. And I remember my ex-girlfriend once, she tagged me in something this record label was saying, send in your stuff, but it has to do this, and this, and you have to let us edit it and have all the rights to it. But we could do it for free. And I was like, no, I don't. Even if they liked what I sent them, I wouldn't want to deal with these people. I wouldn't be myself anymore. I wouldn't be able to make what I want to make.
Yeah, I think there's I noticed a similar thing happening with podcasts recently. I saw a couple of things pop up that were like, hey, I have a kind of a radio station where I'm playing different things. If you want, we'll air your podcast on there, sort of thing. But it's very kind of little information, and it's, very much that idea of, well, we'll air it on there, we'll maybe run ads throughout, we'll chop and change and edit and this and that. And it seems on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, people are going to listen to my thing and it's going to get, but it's not, registering your downloads, it's on somebody else's thing and they've got full control of it. And it can be scary letting go of something that you've made, that you're passionate about, and say, well, this is my thing, and somebody else going, yeah, but I think like this is better. So it's understandable that you've got to be careful. And you're right that it's not all record companies. It's not all, there are people that, as you said, genuinely, quite often you'll hear about maybe like an actor or somebody who's kind of made money in another way, but is passionate about music, that they're like, I just want to make, help people get their music out. But generally big companies that, we've got investors, we've got, shareholders, we need to make this much money each year, and this is how we're going to do it. And
yeah, exactly.
And the creative side is... Sorry.
More because they might have to than because they want to. They're more likely to look at you as a number than a creative.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously where then the difference between being independent and going that path. I mean, if you can find that ideal support network, brilliant. But it's quite difficult, isn't it? It's quite So my next question is, when are you going to go on Pop Idol or X Factor or whatever the current ones are?
I live in Luxembourg when I'm not at university.
So when are you going on Luxembourg Idol?
There is a Luxembourg's Got Talent, and I know people who've been on it because everybody in Luxembourg knows each other because there's about 7 people living here.
So you've got a good chance of winning.
So it's possible, but I don't speak any of the languages. That I wouldn't know what they would say to me. They wouldn't know if they loved it or hated it.
So you live there, but you don't speak any of the language.
Well, that's the thing, is it's the business center of Europe. I think it has just become the richest country in the world. It just overtook whatever the last one was. I think it began with a K. And people come in from loads of other countries. Barely anyone who lives in Luxembourg is actually Luxembourgish because they come in to work in the banks from Germany or Belgium or France. Or in our case, we've come over to be NATO representatives from the UK. Most of the people I went to school with were not Luxembourgish, the vast majority, in fact. So yeah, the business language is either French or English, and I try my best at French. I walk into McDonald's and I start and say "Je voudrais," and as soon as I walk in, they can smell the English on me, and I start in French, and they always reply in English, and I go, well, why do I bother then? So I never get a chance to practice French, even if I want to. So it's just all ebbed away since I had to stop learning it at school.
Yeah, don't worry about it. You don't need it. They never appreciate it, so just forget it. Oh, yeah.
What you were saying earlier about if you not really care much about the music you're making, if you just want to be the next big pop star, really, then signing to a label can make sense. And you do probably stand to make more money that way, even with them taking a big portion of your earnings because of the publicity and the circuits they put you through. But if you are lucky enough, and this doesn't happen that often, but if you are lucky enough to make a big name of yourself as an independent musician, then you stand to make a lot more money, and considerably more money. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the famous Forbes list.
I have. Do you know what? I was in trepidation that you were about to say, I don't know if you've heard about this famous musician. And I was like, of course I haven't heard of this famous musician. I've just told you, we've spent half an hour speaking about how I don't know anything about music. I have heard of the Forbes, the rich list, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And a lot of them are hip hop moguls. And I think there's a list that's just for people in hip hop. And the people at the top is always, and it's always by a huge margin between 1 and 2. I think it's more or less all the time Macklemore now. That's because he managed to be a very, very popular rapper and an independent one. So he's made loads of money. And Tech9 is another one who's not even that popular, but he runs his own label called Strange Music. And as the head of that label, he makes most of the money for it. So he is one of the most rich rappers, even though he's not necessarily one of the most popular.
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it, how sometimes like being better at business is more important than being better in your art, almost. So
yeah.
Just knowing how to do things. Yeah. Any podcasters on that list?
Maybe in the spare time, but should I
be holding out hope, or or am I just like waiting for you to become successful and then
and carry you with me
yeah, exactly.
It might be the other way around.
or am I waiting for you to become successful and then sue me for using your music on my podcast? Right.
I'm just looking at my stats now. I have gotten, since I released my most recent EP, 1 cent from Finland, so I wouldn't worry too much about it yet.
Just you wait for this episode to drop. It's gonna you're gonna go viral.
All your Swedish fans. I'm gonna be really big in Scandinavia.
Again, sincere appeal. I'm not even joking at this point. If you are in Sweden and you are listening, please just tweet me or email me or something. I need to know who you are. It's driving me crazy. I don't know what's going on. What is it about this show that they like? I mean, to be honest with you, if you're listening to this, what is it about this show that you like? And tweet me in that. So we've spoken a little bit about music. I think, considering I'm so bad at music, we've done pretty well. You get now the opportunity to ask me some questions about your topic, that is, well, being an independent musician, or music in general. Have you got any questions for me?
Well, I knew that this was going to be a segment because I've listened to the show before. What I was going to ask was about if you're looking to trying to get your son musical, but you talked about that a little bit. And you don't seem that bothered, but your wife is into it. Is that more or less what you said?
That is what I said. So my wife is Filipina, and
right.
And it might sound stereotypical. Filipinos love music, and it's just a fact. And it's not, that's not a racist comment or anything like that. That is, for them, when they get together, they love to sing, to play music. They have like a little karaoke machine. It's called Magic Mike, I think. And like you can go into any household, they have it. Go and ask your Filipino friends. They've got one. And they love, it's made and produced in the Philippines. It's just so popular there. They love singing. So her brother, he just got a guitar and decided to teach himself how to play. And he did it like relatively late, if that makes sense. He wasn't like still very young when he started to do it. So she would like him to learn something. He's 5 he's just turned 5. So it probably is a good age for him to do it. But
yeah, very good age.
It depends. So my point, here we go. My parenting point of view is if I'm going to spend money, well, I'm not. No, like if it was to pay for lessons.
Okay. Sorry.
I would rather like spend the money to pay for him to learn to swim or like have swimming lessons or something like that, because I feel that swimming could save his life.
Right.
I don't think the ability to play the guitar is going to save his life. I don't know that for sure. There could be a situation in which there is, he's been kidnapped and he's held hostage and he has to play the guitar for his freedom. That might happen. But it's more realistic that, we live in England, it's an island. He could be traveling abroad, the plane or boat or whatever, crashes into the sea, ability to swim, that's going to save, right?
Yeah, it'll serve you right now if one day he's out swimming in the ocean and he gets kidnapped by pirates that'll only let him free if he'll sing him a song.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he knows a few shanties, so he'll be fine. To be honest, I think it would probably be good for him. He's got to learn something that is not going to disturb me when he's playing it. So
drums are out.
Drums are definitely out. A friend of the show, I say friend of the show, this will be the big test to see if he really listens. Bob, if you're listening, Bob, I'm calling you out. So he's a friend of mine. He's actually the person responsible for my move to Italy in the first place. And he's a fantastic pianist. He's like, he played, pubs and clubs and did loads of stuff, and he went to different schools, and he's very good. He doesn't really do it in his free time. And actually, a friend of mine, they were teaching their son to play piano, like having lessons. And I knew he was coming up to visit, and I was like, oh, ask him to play. He's really good. He knows how to play. And she came up to me like the next week and was like, oh, he knows how to play. Yeah, I told you he knows how to play. No, but he really knows. Yeah, I told you he really knows how to play. So he's like really good. But what I used to love was going into his house, and he had like the keyboard set up, but he'd be playing it with headphones. So I know that he can hear this beautiful melody, and all I can hear is him just randomly tapping on soundless key, and I can just hear like the thud, thud, thud of all the different keys that he's hitting. So maybe that could work. If he can use headphones, that'll be fine. But
there is equivalent to that for most instruments, including drums. If your boy ever comes up to you one day and says, I really want to learn drums, you can get an electric drum set, which is a much more elaborate version of the sort of 4 thing that I had, but you can plug headphones in and you won't know he's doing it. But
come on, an electric drum set?
Yeah, they're great. I use one to record live when I feel like it needs to be a bit more organic. So as I was saying earlier, normally when I make drums, drums is one of the easiest ones to get away with, and it doesn't sound artificial. I'll tend to do that on a program, even though drums is my best instrument, just because it's very hard to record with real drums, because you need, a million mics to do it properly, and you have to really know what you're doing. But if you have an electric drum set, you just plug it from one end into the other, because it's all handled on a computer attached to the drum set, and when you hit the drum, it doesn't really make any noise. It just sort of goes thud, very damp thud.
Yeah,
and
I don't know if I can handle a damp thud. That's
well, if you're in a different room, you wouldn't know it's happening.
Yeah, So if any future listeners to this show are like, we've noticed a little problem with your audio. Occasionally we can hear like a damp thud coming through. I'm like, yeah, that's my son in the other room with his electric drum kit. No, honestly now, if he is to learn an instrument, I probably would lean towards the piano. And it's such a stupid reason, but I remember what my music teacher at school, so we are now going back like 15 odd years, but I remember asking her once, like, what's the best instrument to play? And she kind of said that piano is and you've actually mentioned it sort of in this discussion, that when you really wanted to know about the different keys, and like I just feel like the piano and the keyboards, and it just gives you an understanding of music in general that is sort of somehow almost superior to any other instrument. Like,
it's that has a little more to do more with kind of conventions of so in my case, in most cases, the software, when you program notes, it'll sort of show the notes when you're choosing notes in a kind of keyboard setup, and a lot of things are that way. But all synthesizers use a keyboard layout. So because of conventions of music and instruments, learning a keyboard can really help you learn other instruments. But most things that have to do with key are kind of tailored. It really helps you understand the difference between a major and a minor key because of the way the white keys and the black keys are set out. Yeah. It helps you understand how a major key works because all the white keys are in C major. Basically, if you just play white keys, then if you just slam randomly on the white keys, it might sound terrible, but it will be perfectly in the key of C major.
That's the way I prefer to play. So,
so it can help you understand why that's the case, because you can see the intervals in the white keys. You can visually really understand it, which is not something that's true of the guitar, because of the guitar, each note is exactly spaced on the frets. So, and sometimes going one will sound bad, and if you don't understand the keys, you won't really understand why that's the case. You have to learn which intervals sound good, and you just have to know it. But with a piano, that's a bit more organically learned if you're sort of taught about keys properly. And that being said, that's true of any instrument once you're educated in it, but I think it kind of speaks for itself a bit more, obviously, on a piano, because it's also A minor. So if you want to be sad, if you just are a little more methodical in your random banging of the white keys, you will also be playing perfectly in A minor.
Okay. You know what's going to happen now is one of two things. So the day that I release this episode, either my wife is going to come up to me and say, ha 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 ha, I've heard you. You said he can learn piano, so let's get him in. Or she's never going to say anything, and I'm going to understand that she doesn't actually listen to this. So, I don't know which of those two I'm more scared of, to be honest with you. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion for that?
Yeah.
It won't be completely muted because it's handled electronically like a keyboard or an electric drum set would be, but it's quieter than a guitar. It's a lot easier to learn than a guitar, and you can get them super cheap and they're super easy to learn. You probably won't need to get any kind of teacher or anything.
Your wife could probably
pick exactly a ukulele. Yeah, they are so easy to learn. You can get them for like £6 on Amazon if you scroll down far enough. Just cheap ones that will last if you don't, just throw them against the wall.
Well, I might do that, but
I
might throw it against the wall, not buy it.
I imagine your wife won't.
Yeah, she'll be catching it. Right. Okay. So, Carlyle, thank you for coming. You now get to be the first to try a new segment we're bringing to the show. So,
fantastic.
Everybody get ready for this. So, this morning I sent out a tweet asking our dear listeners for some questions. I didn't tell them who was coming on the show. I didn't tell them what your topic was going to be about. So these are very much questions without context. You ready to answer a few questions for our dear listeners?
Let's do it.
So the first question I have for you. So we had a few different questions. I haven't taken all of them, just so you know. But I've picked a few. I think you'll work out who some of them are from. A few others, I think the first couple I'm going to read out are actually from Dante from Play D&D, who was on our episode about film making. So, apt film, sort of music and films. So a couple of questions for you. What is the most exotic food you've ever had?
What's the most exotic food I've ever had? I'm in the past 2 years, I've been vegetarian. And
you should have said this before we started recording, because that would have been a much shorter episode.
All the questions in this are about meat.
Yeah.
But kind of morally, before that, I was always, it's either you don't have any of it or you have all of it. So I've kind of always just gone in on any meat, anyone, before I turned vegetarian, on the ethos that if you're okay with one thing, you should kind of be okay with all of it.
I do agree.
So
with that.
yeah, I've had like loads of weird squid stuff and frog's legs and like a pig head thing. I've had like bits of scalp. It wasn't very nice.
Okay, I'm going to accept bits of scalp as the most exotic food you've ever had. And we won't ask any further questions. No, I mean about that. We'll ask some more questions. What is something you did that you regret doing, apart from this podcast?
I don't regret this podcast. Though if we're sticking to the topic of this podcast, I do regret kind of trying to be so independent. If I kind of looked up how to do things online, then a lot of my earlier work would sound a lot better. I write good music and I'm confident on that, but I'm not good at the polishing, and that's a process that I'm constantly learning because I never go to a studio. I never have professional mixes and masters on things, and maybe I should have, but I'm kind of barreling in now to kind of getting that DIY sound, but also making it sound good. So yeah, that's something I regret. It's kind of, not looking for help when I could do with some.
I'm just scrolling through these questions and I've seen one which is brilliant. What is your opinion on seafood?
What's my opinion on seafood? That wasn't something that was particularly hard for me to give up. I love calamari, and I was actually talking to someone about this recently. If I had a cheat food, if I had a day where I would eat meat, things that I really miss, I don't know why, but there are 3 things I miss, like deep fried calamari rings, I miss beef jerky, and I miss pulled pork, and I would probably just dip calamari rings into pulled pork and just eat that.
Okay, it's probably for the best that you're a vegetarian at this point.
Yeah, probably. But I don't like most fish, so I didn't have a problem giving up fish.
Okay.
I like deep fried like cod, like you'll have in a fish and chip shop, but like properly, cuisine fish, I never really have enjoyed anyway.
Because I had a long discussion with someone the other day about, if you're vegetarian, I don't think you should eat fish. I can't handle this. I'm a vegetarian, I eat fish that. Because that I feel is a bit insulting to fish. It's like
it makes no sense.
They're a subspecies, and I disagree with that. It's the same reason I get so annoyed with Peppa Pig, to be honest with you. I can't stand that every animal in Peppa Pig is a human, apart from fish that are fish. I feel they're being mistreated. But that is a topic for another day. Probably for the rankness of everything.
Pescatarians get my goat as well. If they're doing it for moral reasons, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But
okay. What is your favourite drink? That's on here.
My favourite is an alcoholic drink.
Well, any drink. It just says drink. You can tell me water.
I'm having a cider right now. I do very much enjoy my ciders, but my favourite alcoholic drink is rum and ginger beer. And ginger beer is my favourite soft drink. Rum is my favourite spirit. When I put them together, I have a great time.
Okay, rare that your favourite soft drink and your favourite spirit go so well together, so that's convenient. What is one thing you do to relax?
One thing I do to relax? It used to be play video games, but I can't really play video games to relax anymore. So I've gotten a lot more into podcasting now. So it'll either be read a book or listen to podcasts or listen to music. Be that.
Oh, what a good answer. What a good answer for this show. So it's the wrong audience you're talking to. They're already listening to a podcast. You tell that to people. Maybe next time you're playing some music somewhere, just stop and be like, you know what, guys? Listen to some podcasts. That's probably better for you. Biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve? Probably pescatarians, now that we brought it up.
Brilliant. Good. I'll accept that and we'll move on swiftly. Dream job?
If I could do, my music properly and tour properly and really make more than $20 in 2 years from it, that would be my dream job.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's like people ask about this. Oh, would you like to do it full time? And you're like, of course. Will I do it full time? That's another matter.
When I was at school choosing my big things during high school, my subjects, I dropped out of music class because I knew everything already. I didn't need to learn about what Mozart and Beethoven did to really care about the music I made and want to perfect my my style and what I like to do. And my mum was actually upset. She was like, "Oh no, he's going to throw away his future in music." And she went to talk to one of the music teachers in the school, and she said, "He's always going to do music. This isn't going to change him." And that's true today. My dream job would be music, but I don't have qualifications in music. I have the grade 4 I talked about in percussion earlier, but I didn't do music at school after sort of middle school, and I've become scientific instead. And I have a bachelor's in genetics now. I'm going next year to do my master's in molecular medicine. So people often ask me, "Oh, what do you want to do with this degree?" And I say, honestly, not really anything. I'm just sort of doing this so
music.
I have a degree. Yeah. If someone offers me a job in the genetics labs, then I'll probably take it so I have money. But what I want to do has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I dropped drama at school and because I had to choose, and I took IT. And I remember the drama teacher being very angry. Like, why would you do that? You're so good at drama. I'm like, yeah, but I think IT is probably more practical. So, I mean, I couldn't edit a podcast with drama, could I? Could probably make a better podcast.
I've not taken IT, to be fair.
Right. Dream job. Okay. Which of these last questions have got? I'm going to go with this question for the last question. Now, this might be a hint as to who submitted some of these questions. Okay. Why is Phil Better so amazing?
He's just so lovable, isn't he? He's nice. He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. He's a very professional podcaster, and he's had some incredible guests. I believe there's an episode he talked about Robin Hood films. It was really good guest on that one, and he's had some very young guests that make you feel very old when you listen to the podcast. So that's
when you were saying, who wrote this? I know the answer should probably be Phil Better, but it wouldn't surprise me if Maisie or Rory had written that.
It was definitely Phil Better.
Yeah, I know.
This one. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I quite enjoy this segment. If you've enjoyed it, dear listener, let me know, and we'll keep it going. But I think it's nice to have a few questions without context, and if you want to hear more of these kind of questions, there's a Q&A episode up on Patreon where I ask and answer questions that listeners sent in to me. So, if you want to support the show, that's one way you can do it. And there's a few other bonus episodes up there as well. So we want to thank you again, Carlyle, for coming on. So you've mentioned a couple of different things that you've got going on. Did you want to plug anything in particular before we end?
Yeah, so I guess it makes more sense for me to plug my music, but this whole thing is going to be that anyway. So, but I'm also on a podcast called Dungeons and Dragons, where the concept is that we come up with things that people can use in Dungeons and Dragons games, very ridiculous things, like new spells or new characters and new classes and new races, that kind of thing. But really what we do is just talk complete rubbish for about an hour. So you can just listen to that.
Okay. So not so different from this one then.
This is focused rubbish.
Okay.
That is just complete rubbish. Right. I don't know why anyone listens to it, but I'm glad that they do.
Okay. Well, I will put in the show notes links to your. I guess you're on YouTube for your music, and we've mentioned Spotify as well. And then you've got your podcast and your social media will all be in there as well. I'll take this opportunity to also plug my new podcast that Carlyle has been one of the first contestants together with Rory, who was back from the episode about gin, and it's called Getting to Know Who, and it's a kind of game show podcast. So there'll be a lot more of those coming as well. So if you haven't had the opportunity to already listen to the episode, head across over to that, and I'll put again a link in the show notes, so you can listen to that as well. So thank you very much for coming, Carlyle. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you very much for the music to start the show. And if you like that, let us know. Tweet me, tweet him. Just let us know that you like that. We're actually trying to put in a little bit of effort to make this a more enjoyable show. So I hope you appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, man. I had a fun time.
Well, it's been a pleasure. So you've helped me out now 2 days of recording in a row. Well done, you. All right, then.
It's always fun.
So that just leaves us to say goodbye to everyone, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Well, he's got a new guest, time to put him to the test. So hey, what's the topic? We don't know, cause he never does research for this show. His name is Jason, he wants to talk to you about a topic you love or something you do. No two topics ever the same. That might sound impressive, but they're all pretty lame. A conversation with